आर देयर एनी शॉर्टकमिंग्स ऑफ बीएमआई? क्योंकि हमारे इंडिया में जैसे आपने कहा था कि देयर आर लीन ओबेसिटी बहुत ज्यादा है, मतलब पतले लोग हैं वो भी ऐसे, अगर उनका विसरल फैट या ऐसा कुछ जो इनविजिबल फैट कहते हैं, अगर वो हम लोग जांचें तो उनमें ज्यादा मतलब फैटी लिवर हो सकता है, पैनक्रियाज में फैट डिपॉजिट्स हो सकते हैं। तो ऐसे बीएमआई के शॉर्टकमिंग्स हैं तो वो क्या है, और उसके अलावा हम कौन से टूल्स मेजर कर सकते हैं, वो हमें समझा दीजिए थोड़ा।
यू आर वेरी राइट। सी, बीएमआई इज नॉट द परफेक्ट क्राइटेरिया फॉर मेजर ऑफ ओबेसिटी, और ये बहुत सालों तक बीएमआई वाज यूज्ड, बट अब अगर आप नाउ ओबेसिटी इज लॉट ऑफ टॉक अबाउट ओबेसिटी इज देयर इन द इन द साइंटिफिक वर्ल्ड। पहले ना क्या था, अनफॉर्चुनेटली, कि यू डिड नॉट हैव मच ट्रीटमेंट इन टर्म्स ऑफ ओबेसिटी, ज्यादा आपके पास ऑप्शंस नहीं थे एक्सेप्ट फॉर डाइट एंड न्यूट्रिशन एंड ऑल दैट, and that also was not very well studied. But now you have a lot of treatment options, including a lot of medications and bariatric surgery and so on. So now there's a lot of talk about the aspect of obesity. और जब भी हम ये चीज करते हैं तो हमेशा ये पहला क्वेश्चन आता है कि इसको how do you measure it? How do you measure? So there is a saying in management that if you can't measure it, then you can't make it. So basically that, right? So if you can measure it, then it will be managed. That is what it is, right? So अगर आप चीज को measure कर सकते हैं, so what happened was that बहुत साल पहले there was no way to measure obesity at all. So I think there was a guy called Quintile who first came up with this concept कि अगर आप है ना खाली weight नहीं लो, आप weight को height से divide करो and then उसको square करो, तो you get a good value which is a reasonably good index. और this was very that point of time lot of insurance companies required कि भाई हम कैसे पता करें कि, because उनको पता था कि ये जो obese लोग हैं ना इनको ज्यादा disease होता है, तो उनको ज्यादा प्रीमियम आप चार्ज करो. So one of the insurance companies, one of the large insurance companies in the US, they actually hired this guy and said that आपका जो index है वो हम use करना चाहेंगे. So they started using this, which is called the quartile index or something like that, and then that became what is known as BMI now. Unfortunately, it was never validated at that time. It was only used for insurance purposes. But वो रह गया, मतलब वो रह गया, अभी इतने साल से रह गया. अब now a lot of doctors, experts are looking at ways कि यार शायद maybe BMI may not be a very good criteria for judging obesity. Unfortunately अभी वो जाने नहीं वाला, क्योंकि वो अभी इतना हमारे दिमाग में रह गया है कि BMI has become part of our life. But there are better ways of measuring obesity. But again, having said that, we have not reached one way which is universal. मतलब सब जिस पे सब एग्री कर रहे हैं या so right now हमारे पास और कोई ऑप्शन नहीं है other than measuring BMI. But BMI is not perfect, right? As you very rightly said, you gave an example of Serena Williams, and you also Dr. Yajnik, and then a lot of other examples of sumo wrestlers. We ourselves are, so we probably know that BMI is not the perfect criteria. किस tool को हम use करना चाहेंगे in future? I feel that there will be more use of these imaging devices which will help us make the diagnosis in terms of visceral fat. जो visceral fat का जो percentage, जो internal fat है, वो कितना हम नाप सकते हैं. तो उसके लिए right now we have 3 things you can do. एक, आपने अगर जिम में देखा होगा तो there is something called bioimpedance, right? तो जिसके आप ना मशीन होता है जिसके आप खड़े रहते हैं, ऐसे हाथ पे रखते हो तो एक इलेक्ट्रिक करंट आपके बॉडी में से जाता है, उसको बायोइम्पिडेंस कहते हैं. और बायोइम्पिडेंस से दे मेजर द बॉडी फैट परसेंटेज, राइट? सो दे good gyms have this available, but again, a lot of sportsmen also use it, and there are professional versions of that also, which is not inaccurate. It's quite accurate also. There is one company which makes very high grade bioimpedance machines, which you can use in your clinic and you can use in your hospital to measure the body fat percentage. So this is one, or visceral fat. This is one way of doing it. There is something called a DEXA, which is the current gold standard. तो वो आप यूज कर सकते हैं. जैसे आप DEXA scan आजकल हम लोग ज्यादा we use it for bone analysis, but it can also be used for fat analysis also. So that is something you can use. And there is you can use a CT scan. So एक we can all decide कि हम ये level के, ये vertebra के level पे हम CT scan कट लेंगे सबका, और ये कट के बेसिस पे हम लोग कितना visceral fat है उसको हम नापेंगे. Now there are software also within the CT scan machine also, which can tell you कि visceral fat percentage at let's say L4 level कितना है, तो वो आपको बता सकता है. तो ये सब चीजें हैं जो डिवाइसेस हैं जो हमारे पास अभी अवेलेबल हैं. बट द प्रॉब्लम इज दैट अगेन नोबडी हैज एग्रीड कि ये सब हम सब यही चीज यूज करेंगे. और दूसरा, अगर आप डेक्सा की बात करें और अगर आप सीटी स्कैन की बात करें तो देयर इज आल्सो रेडिएशन रिस्क एक्सपोजर होता है. सो आई some पूरे दुनिया में सबका हम BMI तो नाप सकते हैं, लेकिन सबका हम we cannot get DEXA of everybody done, or we cannot, even though the radiation is very small, we cannot expose the entire population to radiation just for epidemiological purpose. So ये problem होता है. So that's why at this point we don't have a perfect way of measuring obesity. We have imperfect ways. We work with that, right? At least हमें कुछ idea आता है. And then specifically अगर there is somebody who, let's say we first measure the BMI, और जिनके BMI सब जो overweight category में आते हैं सबका आप बाकी जो normal
एक funnel जैसा हो गया,
funnel जैसा. तो जिनको जो overweight है उसको आप further analysis करो, उनका bioimpedance कराओ, और जिनका bioimpedance ज्यादा है उनको आप DEXAs कराओ, right? So that is something you can do. So that is how we typically work. But as of now, we don't have a perfect measure, and that's an area of active research. So if a lot of your youth who are listening to this who are interested in medical research, one very important area of research right now is how to measure obesity. What is the perfect way of measuring obesity? Or perfect way of measuring metabolic disorder, which I think is something which is still lacking. And that is an area of active research.
एक खाली नो कॉस्ट टूल मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूंगा कि पेट की सर्कमफरेंस, जो वेस्ट सर्कमफरेंस कहते हैं, डू यू थिंक दैट इज अ गुड स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट फॉर अ नो कॉस्ट टूल? मतलब घर पे ही सब लोग कर सकते हैं.
So that's something which is yes, very interesting, very important, right? So there are now a lot of studies, including Indian studies, which have found that जो आपका waist circumference है, waist circumference is a good indirect measure of visceral fat, right? So it's a good, especially अब इसमें इंटरेस्टिंग चीज ये है कि हम जब कॉकेशियन और इंडियंस के बारे में बात करते हैं, सो ये एक ऐसी चीज है जो वेस्ट सर्कमफरेंस है जो इंडियन में बहुत अच्छी तरह से बैठ जाती है. मतलब द इंडियन कट ऑफ्स दे आर वेल डिफाइंड आल्सो, एंड
क्योंकि हमारी वो एंड्रोजेनिक ओबेसिटी ज्यादा है, हमारे जो एप्पल पीयर या पीयर शेप कहते हैं.
नो, वी आर एक्चुअली एप्पल शेप. वी आर एप्पल. इनफैक्ट कॉकेशियंस आर आल्सो एप्पल. We are not peer. So peer जो shape होता है females में, but I think that doesn't apply to this context. So that is more of gynecoid and enteroid obesity, but वो भी एक concept है, that is now outdated. So that's not a concept. We also learned that in medical school also, but that's something जो इसका अभी ज्यादा इतना importance नहीं है. But coming back to this point, so what happens is that visceral fat is a very the waist circumference is a good measure of visceral fat. So again, उसमें Caucasian के जो cutoffs हैं उससे हम we use a lower cutoff, right? So Caucasian में for males we use 108 centimeter. For Indians we use typically 90 to 92 centimeter, right? So some people use 94. So again, that's somewhere, but around 90 to 94 is the cutoff you can consider for the waist circumference, and this has good correlation with visceral fat. So that is something you can use. But इसमें complexity ये है कि उसको भी नापना, कहाँ पे exactly नापना is a problem, because उसमें भी there is area.
सब लोग वो पेट सांस अंदर ले लेते हैं.
There is an area that is in fact, there are a lot of endocrinology thesis done on specifically how and where to measure the waist circumference. So ये एक थोड़ा again issue है, but again this is a good no cost tool to try it out, and then you can check that out. So that's something you can you'll of course need somebody's help. But if you are able to do that, so that's something which is a good idea. And some people use the suprapubic MS. Some people use the umbilicus. So इसमें भी थोड़ा debate है, but again eventually there is now currently as we are talking, there are guidelines being made for obesity in Indians by a team of doctors. So soon, maybe by the end of this year, we'll have the guidelines for obesity for Indians. These things will be clarified. So once you have a guideline, then all of us can follow the same guideline, and we can all be on the same page or same terms.
दोस्तों, ये वीडियो अगर आपको वैल्यूएबल लगा तो इसे लाइक कर अपने सारे दोस्तों से इसे शेयर कीजिएगा. इस चैनल को सब्सक्राइब तो आप कर ही लेंगे. चलिए मिलते हैं.